Hello. I want to tell a story about relationships. It's not just men who suffer from the return of their exes, there are also girls who have a blank mind and zero self-respect. I'm Angela, a 20-year-old girl who is studying at university and has been working since the age of 14, sometimes in her field of study, and sometimes doing odd jobs. Let me tell you a little about my first relationship so that you can understand that I was smarter at 17. In my 11th grade, I was studying for an exam in a cafe around 11 p.m. For some reason, I needed to go to the store to buy textbooks. I was walking down the street for about 10 minutes with my headphones on when I saw someone's body walking next to me and trying to cut me off. I tightened the pepper spray in my pocket. I stopped to let him pass, and it turned out that the guy had seen me at the cafe, went to the restroom, and thought he would approach me after I left. But I disappeared, and only my books were left. That's how we met. Let's call him Stas. The weather was warm, and we walked for 3 hours. I immediately liked him. He was tall, brunette, and also a programmer. He looked very young, and I thought we were the same age, but then he revealed that he was 26. I thought he was joking, but it turned out to be true. We exchanged phone numbers, and instead of taking mine, he said that I should write his. I thought, wow, what a confident guy. He doesn't even need my number. He's already thinking about calling me. Well, I wrote it down, and we parted ways. I messaged him a few days later. He was right about his confidence. One date, then another, and somehow everything started spinning. Kisses, sex, it was great with him. Well, let's start with the non-adequate part, and it started quite quickly, about a month after we met. I got a message from him, "Why are you online so often and not texting me?" At first, I thought it was some kind of flirtation, but he really got mad at me for texting with other guys. When I replied that I could listen to music here, talk to my girlfriends, and it's strange to report on my online activity, he just got offended. So, I should have finished the story earlier, but I just got suspicious because he didn't say anything like that in real life. Let me tell you a little about myself. I never talked to guys at all, didn't have any male friends or anything like that. My circle of communication was exclusively with girlfriends. Once we were hanging out and he brought up the topic of marriage in general. I said I didn't want to get married, at least not at 17. For that, they attacked me, saying, "If you say that now, then you will never want to get married in the future." I said, "Are you kidding me? We've only known each other for 2 months at most, what marriage?" Well, that was our first argument in real life, and he just went home after that. Once he begged me with tears in his eyes to give him my phone to make sure I didn't have anyone else. I didn't give him any reason to think that way for a moment, because there were no guys other than him in my circle of communication. Well, I said it was my personal thing and I didn't want anyone to interfere. He just took the phone out of my hands and locked himself in the bathroom with it. I calmly asked him to give it back. He came out after 5 minutes and I said, "Did you not find anything interesting?" He was silent. I took the phone back and started putting on my shoes. He asked where I was going, and I said that after that, I wasn't going to talk to him anymore. And so, guys, sometimes girls don't give you their phone and start talking about personal space not only when they have something to hide. Just like they say, if there is a desire to check someone's phone, then the relationship is already unhappy. I won't talk too much, there were some funny stories with him. I'll tell you the last one after which we stopped communicating. He invited me to a meeting, and I went. At this meeting, I was told that Stas went to a psychologist who said that I was 100% cheating on him. When I asked how she could have known that without knowing me personally, I didn't hear anything. I let him know that I couldn't stand this nonsense anymore, and that such happiness was not meant for me in life, so goodbye. Through a million SMS messages from different accounts, to which I simply did not respond and immediately added to my block list, he started calling me. I also blocked and rejected numbers. It was sad, I confess, very sad. After all, it was my first relationship, but I understood that this was not my option. And somehow my dad and I were driving in the car, and then another call came in. Dad asked who was calling, and I said, probably the same guy again. He said, give me the phone, I'll explain to him to leave you alone. And then this circus started. Dad took the phone, he was aware of my life and knew who I was hanging out with and how I spent my time. And the following dialogue took place. Stas. Hello Dad. Hello Stas. Who is this? Dad, Angel's father. Don't call here anymore. Stas. Oh, I thought it was one of her boyfriends again. Well, if it's really her father, then I have a question for you. Are you aware that your daughter is having sex with a lot of guys? Dad was shocked by such a statement. Dad, what are you saying? Listen, she's not your wife and didn't make any promises to you. Back off already, and if you don't understand words, I'll have to talk to you in a different way. Dad explained that these guys can only bother girls with words, and if they sense danger and that someone can stand up for them, they back off immediately. Well, he was right. Overall, our relationship lasted for 5 months. Yes, that was the introduction. I have relatives in another country whom I sometimes visited in the summer, but living there was only a thought, and not a serious one at that. Later, I moved in with my relatives, but couldn't stay with them. I stayed with a friend. I decided to write to an acquaintance with whom I hung out once in this country several years ago and hadn't spoken to since. In my opinion, he was happy about my message and invited me for a walk. Let's call him Andre. I liked Andre, but it was immediately evident that he was a bit nervous. I thought it was normal, and that I wasn't the only one who felt that way, even though I tried not to show it. Andre was 25 years old, he had been living abroad for a long time, and was a programmer again. I joked that I would probably avoid this profession in the future, but I understand that the problem is with me. He seemed like a reasonable, smart guy. We walked for 8 to 10 hours on the first day, time passed quickly. He showed me around different interesting places, and we went to a bar in the evening. He told me that he still lives with his ex-girlfriend because she doesn't have the means to move out. I thought to myself, why is he telling me this? And changed the subject. I thought it had nothing to do with me, we were strangers to each other. He also asked if I had been in a relationship before, and I said I had, but it was a topic for my girlfriends, and I wouldn't discuss it with him. He also asked if he could bring a friend, but only briefly, because they wouldn't be able to see each other again. I thought it was strange, but okay, I guess he didn't mind introducing me to his friend, and maybe he liked me. It was a bit awkward because I was still improving my foreign language skills, but I said something primitive. His friend left, and I was a little tipsy by then, so I asked if I could hold his hand. We walked hand in hand to the bus stop and said goodbye. After that, our communication went well, and he invited me out almost every day, but I had online classes, so I couldn't always go. We spent a lot of time together, and during this time, he only held my hand once. By the 4th meeting, I was annoyed by this, and started to think that there was something wrong with me. Maybe he didn't like me, or maybe he was just polite and used to being friends with girls. By the 5th meeting, I agreed with the idea in my head that if nothing happens, I'll just end the communication. Well, although he seemed like an interesting person and a cool guy, it killed the mood, and besides, I didn't want to do anything myself. First of all, he's 5 years older than me, and secondly, I felt that taking his hand was already enough. We spent the whole day together again, and in the evening we sat on the grass in a beautiful place overlooking the city and talked. Suddenly, he fell silent and I noticed out of the corner of my eye that he was just staring at me. I turned to him, and he asked me, "Can I kiss you?" I had so many thoughts in my head, but I smiled and said, "Why are you asking?" Everything was positive, and that was when we kissed. I was glad that I finally understood that he really liked me, and the guy was just a little unsure, like me. He always came up with interesting ways to spend time together, whether it was at concerts, bars, museums, or just wandering around the city. I always thanked him, and I'm grateful even now, even though our story didn't end happily. He said that being with me made his head work at full capacity, and he had a lot of energy to spend quality time with me. He really helped me psychologically back then because my family was giving me a hard time with insults and threats of deportation, but that's another story. We hung out like this, walked around, kissed, and then one day we were sitting on a bench, and the moment was romantic. I was reading him modern literature poetry when he said to me, "I love you." We had been spending hours walking around and kissing, but nothing else had happened. I chuckled a bit and asked, "What do you mean?" "Well, I love you," he replied, looking terrified. I jokingly started to explain the difference between liking someone, being infatuated with them, and loving them. We agreed that we were just in the liking phase. He said a lot of nice things, that I was beautiful, that he had never been so happy as he was with me, that he wasn't sure I was even real, maybe his brain had made me up, and so on. It was nice to hear. I told him that I felt good with him too, but in my head, I was thinking that there wouldn't be anything more between us, especially since we hadn't even had sex. And then, after a week or two, he surprised me with the news that his ex had found a new place to live. After some time, he hinted that we've done so much together, let's come to my place and relax, watch movies. I thought finally. I had to drive for an hour and a half to get there, but when I entered the apartment, there was no glass of water, nothing. We sat on the couch and he started kissing me. I thought, whatever, I've been waiting for this for so long. Everything was going well, but then he changed. He said he was having a panic attack. I thought, damn, we just got here. We decided to relax and watch a TV show. After a while, he started making advances again, and I responded positively. We even made it to the bed. He started undressing me, but then he stopped and said he couldn't do it. I thought, no problem, it happens. I tried to help him get in the mood, but he seemed to feel sick. After a while, he tried again, but it didn't work, even with my efforts. Then he got angry and it turned out it was because he couldn't understand what was happening to his body. He said I was his girl, and he hadn't been with anyone else besides his ex. He said he slept poorly the night before because he was nervous about my visit. I tried to calm him down and told him that it happens, and it's not a big deal. He asked me if I still wanted to talk to him after this. I said, of course, I like you, nothing bad happened. I smoothed things over and offered to stay overnight. I stayed, and in the morning, we had sex, but he couldn't finish. I thought it was still progress. I don't remember exactly what was said, but later we had a conversation about something, and I jokingly said he wasn't my boyfriend. He said, What does that make me then? I'm your boyfriend. I thought it was funny, but I understood that it wasn't really appropriate to start a relationship after just one sexual encounter. I already had to leave my girlfriend and there were two options, go back home or to relatives who lived far away. I didn't want to live with my relatives and was already thinking it would be better to return to my homeland. Andre knew about this. We were walking and he said, "Listen, you can live with me if you want." To my surprised eyes, he added, "Sorry to say it's so early, but you really can stay if you don't mind." I didn't know what to say. It was unexpected for me, but also pleasant. So I stayed with him. I never lived with a guy before and in my imagination, it was all arguments about who washes dishes, who takes out the garbage, and so on. But after living together for a month and a half, we never argued once. However, there was one moment when he went out and I saw a message on his tablet from his ex, even though he told me he wasn't in contact with her. I was immediately saddened because the perfect picture was shattered, but I understood that if he really was talking to her, then we weren't meant to be. When he returned home, I had already calmed down a bit, but couldn't ask him calmly. I just kept to myself. He asked what happened and I was silent. A few hours later, I calmly told him everything. Andre said that they just have a group chat with their friends and the message was for them, and he wasn't talking to her. I breathed a sigh of relief. I tried to wake up earlier in the morning, cook something tasty, clean up, although I have to give credit, he's very neat, everything was always in its place. At the same time, I was making my resume, looking for a job, but with limited language skills, it was taking some time. But he never discussed our relationship with me. Like who is responsible for what. He always offered and paid for everything, and never showed that it bothered him. And I never asked him, it was also my fault. I just thanked him. He had a relative come to visit him, and we started living together. There was a living room in the apartment. I communicated with her normally, as if everything was fine, as if. At this time, my grandmother loses consciousness several times and goes to the hospital with a complicated stage of cancer. I spend days with her in hospitals. She pulls out the IVs from her hands every time and just gets nervous. There was also a separate story with relatives at this moment. They were against doctors and tried to take my grandmother and treat her themselves. This is in short. I had already seriously taken on the responsibility of taking guardianship over my grandmother. A long story. I'm just getting at the fact that Andre was like a safe island for me, where I felt calm. He also sometimes said that he loved me, and I somehow changed the subject. Twice I had a desire to tell him about my love too, but I held back. On the third time, I gave in. It was already the second month of our life together. He also managed to introduce me to his mother via video call, and I also introduced him to my parents. But one day I see that he has changed his facial expression. I ask what happened. He is silent. I try to talk to him. And then he just tells me, "Angela, this country is not for you, you won't last long here. It's better to return to your own country. I don't see a future in our relationship. You have no one here in this country except me. My parents pay for this apartment because I can't find a job right now. It's hard to live with 3 people. I rush to live with a girl again. I need to stand on my own feet. Besides, we never had a topic that we could discuss for 5 hours. I ask if it's necessary. What topic can you discuss for 5 hours? Well, I once discussed pipes and electricity with a stranger in a bar for 5 hours. At that moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I was just shocked. I couldn't do either. It felt like it was all a dream and I just wanted to disappear. I asked if he loved me, and in just a second, everything disappeared. Andrew said that I have until the end of the month to decide what I will do, and then I need to move out of the apartment. I said that it reminds me of his past relationships. He said yes, the situation is similar. I replied, oh, so this isn't your first time, well okay then. I spent the evening in silence, feeling a tightness in my chest, and eventually fell asleep on the couch. I didn't understand how things went wrong after such a good start. The next day, I woke up and went to see my grandmother in the hospital. I called my parents and told them everything. My parents are amazing and always support me emotionally. They explained that it's normal to not find lifelong love at 20 years old. They advised me to react calmly and thank Andrew for his support and the time he gave me until the end of the month. I was confused but decided to follow their advice. I went to see Andrew and told him everything. I said that I understood everything and thanked him for being there. He didn't say anything. I asked him if I could really stay until the end of the month, and he confirmed it. I started actively looking for a job and a new place to live that same day. I had some money saved up, so I knew I could at least go to a hotel if things got really bad. I acted neutrally and friendly towards Andrew, without any negative emotions, insults, or anything like that. I realized that relationships can end without arguments or irrational behavior. Sometimes you just realize that you're not right for each other. On the next day, he started discussing some topics with me by himself, asking if I wanted pizza because he had ordered it. I said I wasn't hungry and thanked him. The pizza arrived, and he asked me if I wanted to watch a TV series with him, as we had done before, and I said yes. While we were sitting and watching, he extended his hand to my knee, just like we used to sit before, but then quickly removed it and did this a few times. I looked at him and said that he was behaving strangely. He replied that he didn't know how to behave. The next day, he asked me what our status was now. I didn't understand what he meant and laughed, asking him to explain. Then we had a conversation where he told me that something came over him and that he didn't mean to tell me to go home, that it was wrong, and that he was sorry and embarrassed. He said that his parents were pressuring him because he didn't have a job, and he was confused about everything. He didn't believe that I could really like him, although I don't know how else he could have shown his interest. He said that he didn't want to end our relationship, but we couldn't live together because his mother was coming soon, but that I should know that he would always be there for me and help me. I listened to him, and he seemed so sincere and scared that I believed him. I said that I understood everything and that I didn't come to this country for him, but we could calmly discuss housing issues. He agreed, and we started talking as before, and everything was fine again. Towards the end of the month, I got a job, and I was doing an internship. I left early in the morning and returned in the evening. I saw him sitting at the computer, and he lazily said hello to me. I realized that something was wrong again because before, when we didn't see each other, we hugged, kissed, and asked about each other's day. After some time, I approached him and asked if everything was okay, and he said yes. But it was clear that it wasn't. I was tired of this, so I started doing my own things. On the next day the same story repeated. I didn't touch him anymore, just waited for the end of the month. I also found a place to move to, but the apartment was in a terrible condition. There was a pile of junk, mice, and cockroaches. I had never seen cockroaches before, not to mention mice. I couldn't find another place as my parents did not support me financially, and I was limited in the amount of money I had. I began to clean up slowly after work, day by day. I carried tons of trash and old furniture out, tables, and cabinets, and asked neighbors for help. Andre was aware of this, but did not offer to help. I didn't say anything to him about it. I just did what I could do myself. At some point, I wanted to kiss him, but he made it clear that he didn't like it. At that moment, I finally realized that it couldn't continue, and moved out the next day. He asked if I needed help with my things, but he asked not as a guy or just a person who wanted to help, but as if out of politeness. Well, I said no. I didn't touch him anymore. He wrote to me every 2 to 3 days, asking how I was doing. We had a short chat and that was it. I worked, continued to clean up, exterminated cockroaches, and started online classes. I had things to do. Then he sent me videos of him going to concerts with different people. I didn't understand what it was for and just said cool. He stopped writing to me for 2 weeks. I know it wasn't about the relationship anymore, for a long time. But it was still sad. I felt like I was left completely alone. Although there were parents and friends who supported me. After 2 weeks, I received a message from him saying hi, how are you? On the one hand, I was happy, but on the other hand, I understood that it would be better if he didn't write. But I answered. He said he had been sick for 2 weeks. I asked if he needed help, and he said yes and would be glad. I went to see him, and his mother met me there. We had dinner and Andre walked me out. I'm sorry, my mom came with work. We had tasks to do, and on top of that, he got sick. He said he had mental problems that he's solving with a psychotherapist and that he wants to make things right. I told him it's not normal to just disappear for 2 weeks like that. He apologized again. In my head, I understood that if a person doesn't care about me for 2 weeks, especially in a foreign country, then it's not a relationship, and the person just doesn't care about me. But I was glad to see him and glad that he supposedly wants to continue communicating. Yes, I'm stupid. I admit it. But I'm being honest about everything. He walked me to the bus stop and asked if he could kiss me. I smiled and said, why do you keep asking? We kissed. So everything seemed to be going well again. He invited me to go out again, but I couldn't juggle him, my studies, and work. I still tried to make time for him. I forgot to mention that because of the time difference, my studies take place at night until morning, and after that, I work full-time. I was confused with my schedule and tired. Everything was good for about 2 months, but then he found out that his ex was dating his best friend, and he was very upset about it. He told me he signed up for martial arts, and I said, cool, why so suddenly? Andrew replied that he wants to scare his friend when they meet. Again, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Once we were riding the bus, and he suddenly took a loud breath. I asked what's wrong, and he said they just passed the building where his ex and friend live now. I kept quiet, thinking, why didn't I end this story earlier? Why do I have to listen to this? When I got home, we texted about something, and my message was the last one. Then he disappeared again. After 3 days, he wrote something and asked how I was. I said I was tired of this. So we stopped talking again. One more thing, he used to pay for my internet in the apartment because I didn't have a card at the time, and I always gave him cash in return. After we stopped talking, I tried to contact support to change the payment method, but long story short, it didn't work out, and he kept paying. A month and a half passed. And then a friend of mine showed me a photo of him with another girl, apparently living together. I was still living my life as usual, but started taking fewer shifts at work. I met some cool people and even started something with a guy. I began to get distracted and had plans for the future. And then suddenly I got a message congratulating me on a holiday and asking how I was doing. I thanked him and said I was doing well, and I asked about his family and grandmother. He asked if I was opposed to meeting somewhere, and I asked why. He said he wanted to personally congratulate me on the holiday and find out how I was doing. My father said that nothing good would come out of this, and did I really want to feel those negative emotions again after every conversation with him? And it turned out that I did. We met at a restaurant, and he was nervous. He said he was unsure whether I was still angry with him. I said that I was, but only for a week, and then I accepted it, so there was no point in discussing it. We talked about various things, and then he asked if I wanted to celebrate New Year's with him. I had already made plans with a group of friends, so I said I couldn't. Andrew then said he wanted to meet with me after the holidays and give me a gift. I said there was no point in giving me anything, and I wouldn't be giving him anything either. He was surprised and asked why. I said, "And how will you give me a gift as a good friend?" Andrew said he didn't see the point in us being enemies. I replied that I didn't see the point either, nor in gifts. We parted on a normal note. There was a guy in front of me that I didn't have any more interest in, or so I thought. I hesitated, but decided to leave a gift for him with the doorman on December 31st because I was on my way to my friends. Plus, he helped me with housing before.